Hey Chris, how's it going? Can you just kind of put in perspective today, the picks you made today?
Yeah, it was it was an interesting day. We really obviously we knew kind of having that first pick in the second round, kind of what our idea was. And then after that it's kind of you wait and see, you have things set up on our board the way we wanted it. And it was a lot of hard work, a lot of decisions, but I like how our day two went and there's a lot of exciting pieces on the way.
Can you talk about in particular the decision to draft Simon there with the 33rd pick? Obviously, you have the first pick of the second day, so you had your choice of a lot of different players. So what made Simon stand out compared to the remaining class?
Yeah, I think raw untapped potential is probably the best way to put it with him. He's such a unique story in terms of his hockey background and his hockey upbringing. And then look at kind of the transition this year from starting in junior A and then moving on to the OHL major junior. You could see, slowly some of those just raw physical abilities really shine through. And for us, it's like Mike said from the very beginning, we're going to draft the best player available and the best fit for us. And when you look at what Simon could be in the future, and even where his game's been over the last, let's say 18 months, it's impressive, and we really believe there's a lot of untapped potential here.
Is it fair to say that with a guy like Simon, that maybe there are other defensemen out there that were, quote unquote, safer, but like you mentioned with Simon, just that untapped potential that he could be really, really special if it all comes together.
Yeah, I mean the word safe is always, an interesting one. I think it's, for me, if you look at it, a guy that's 6'6", almost 6'7", and can really skate and competes and can use his length, that's pretty safe too. And if you look around the NHL right now in terms of who's playing, so in terms of yes, there's some raw, and it's going to take time, but all these kids are, and I think as long as we understand the human, which we do, and we understand what our process is for him, and we have such a fantastic development staff here that we think we make the investment that we feel comfortable, whether it's safe or not. We like the profile that's there.
And I want to ask you about three players in particular from the same team. McKinney, Moultrie, and Gallant all came from the U18's USA team. What stood out about them, their performance at their tournament, and just in general, those three American players?
Yeah, I mean, Muchin played most of the year in Chicago, so he played with them at the end. He got called up. So there's, we obviously have some, we know Muchin back. We are our area guys and Mike, and so we obviously have some knowledge there with him prior to it, and then with McKinney and Galan, I mean, all three guys bring a high level of compete. They bring a high motor. Obviously, Galan is, on the smaller side in terms of what, he's not 6'2", he's not 6'3". But I think if you spend any time watching him, he plays like that. So we've talked about all along, we want to bring in, highly competitive kids. And although all three were taken in different spots, the one common denominator is that they're highly, highly competitive kids.
All right, thanks for now.
Go ahead, Max.
Hey Chris, just when it gets late into the draft in this situation, and maybe there's picks coming through, what maybe kind of goes into the situation of maybe picking a guy with the raw talent? How do you decide when you get this late in the draft? Maybe when there's a little more question mark surrounding the player.
Yeah, I mean, you're sweating it out, trying to. We have our board, and we obviously have certain waves we want it to flow and go. So there is a little bit of sweating it out. But again, we put so much preparation time in the last 9 months and getting our list right, our board right. And so we really are prepared for anything that happens. We have multiple options in place. If player goes here, what do you want to do? And sometimes drafts will allow you a little bit more movement in terms of, clusters of players. Other times you're afraid if you move off a player, then you're not going to get him your next time around. So I think we're always in conversation. We're always in dialogue with that. But a lot of the work's been done before in terms of where our cutoffs are, where we see value. And, it's really important for our group to make sure we just kind of talk things through beforehand, because really 3 minutes when you're on the clock, it goes really fast, especially in day two where it's kind of running. So, we talk through it. And then when we get to that point, it's like anything else. We want our guys to have passion. We want them to push for players they like, and they want to be a Shark. So that's what they did. And that's what we did here today.
And when you mentioned the compete and in the way you guys scout these guys, I mean, it's kind of a wide ranging where they're coming from. Some are juniors, some are going to NCAA. How do you feel just the overall prospect and the landscape that it's changing as? Like you see all the stuff, CHL and NCAA. How do you feel that's benefited maybe some of these players in this moment when they're in their draft year?
Yeah, I mean, the one example right away would be like Max Heiss. We draft Max Heiss. His plan is to go to Michigan State, but he's going to go play a year major junior next year. I believe it's PA. Is I think the plan for him, at least is what I'm understanding. It obviously could change, but there's a prime example of a kid that didn't have that option before. So I think, I kind of mentioned this yesterday, a little bit in with Dan is that the kids have options now. They have places to go, but it's also, you're gonna go through a period where kids are gonna think that the grass is greener on the other side. They can go and get better somewhere else where maybe the situation they were in was actually pretty good to begin with. So um, it's certainly changing for us because kids have more options and kids are going to want to do, you know, what they want to do. I think our perspective is you just kind of take it as it goes. And I do think in general, you can now, there's a little bit more ways for kids to really do get what they want. If it's a kid that needs more games, there's options for that. There's a kid that needs more practice time, maybe needs more working out. There's other routes for that. So the landscape is going to continue to change. And I think right now, especially the first couple of years is going to be a lot of figuring out what's going on. But then once things settle in, at the end of the day, it should be what's best for the kids. And this system in place should allow kids to really be where they think they need to be for their development.
And then the last one for me, just kind of an all-encompassing question maybe about yesterday and to today. I mean, the core of this rebuild seems to be pretty close to set. Obviously, a couple more moves to do and things like that, I'm sure. But just over the last few years since Mike has come in and you've, been part of the organization, right? How do you feel just the way this team is drafted and the direction of the team and the core? Do you feel like it's shaping up how you guys kind of envisioned as you go through each draft?
Yeah, for me, I mean, in term personally, from our staff perspective on the amateur side, I think we've set out to execute Mike's plan, and I look at it, I look at their job I've done, and obviously we're never going to know where things are, and it's 3 years in, and I'm really proud of the group. I think we have, in a short amount of time, been able to go out and get some really quality talent, some quality kids, and to your point, it's never over, and the next step is even harder than the first one in terms of, for us and on the amateur side of continue the expectation is we should find players every year and hopefully soon enough we won't be in these situations where we're picking one, two, or high. But the expectation for me, for our group, and the expectation on myself is to continue filling the cupboards. And if we can give more players in terms of, high-end prospects or find guys in the draft in the right spots, they just become assets in terms of trying to make your team better. So we are really proud of our group, and for me and the group of guys that work with me and work all out throughout the world, really I'm really proud of us, but it's also we're just getting started. We need to keep going.
Awesome. Congratulations on the long weekend and all the hard
Yeah.
work.
Thank you.
Curtis?
It's just kind of going off of that a little bit. You know, like you said, I mean, Mike kind of said it's the last time they hope to be drafting this high. So how important was it for your group to just make sure, like every year, to get the right guys and to make sure that these players are going to be fit long term, not only this year, but maybe this the last couple of years too.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I tell our guys at the beginning of every year, and certainly going to draft, is this is our one opportunity to impact the organization. We're not on the road with the team every day. We're not in the rink. We're not in San Jose. But trust me, behind the scenes, we are doing everything we possibly can to make a difference in the organization. And for me, in terms of where I've been before and now, with the way Mike treats us and how we all are all allowed to speak our mind and have an opinion, and the trust he puts in not only myself but our group, it's infectious. And you have a bunch of people that show up here wanting to work every day for Mike. So it is a really, great, awesome work environment. And when we get into these conversations and figuring out which way we want to go, to your point about not picking high, it's we want to find a way to find the best player. And in doing that, it becomes we look at every single possible question we can, possible situation. We look at every possible player. We analyze everything. And at the end of the day, the decisions we make, whether it might make sense to some or it might not make sense to anybody, is we truly believe is the best decision for the team.
Were there any discussions about, I mean, you guys didn't move up or down throughout the last couple of days. Were any discussions about moving up at all, or were you pretty?
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a question for Mike, but in terms of, there was obviously lots of conversations, lots of situations, and again, my part of my responsibility is just kind of sit there and if he has ideas in terms of value and where things may lay and what's coming up next for prospects. And I think at the end of the day, we kind of just stayed pat and I think the last couple of years we made moves to move up or change. And I think this year was just one of those things where we sat pat and we feel like we did pretty well.
You mentioned how the landscape is changing, and then players now have the opportunity to do what they feel is best for them and their development. I mean, looking back, had these rules been in place last year, do you think a guy like Sam Dickinson could have really benefited from having that option? I mean, it doesn't seem like he can go back to the OHL, but it's the OHL or the NHL. He doesn't have that option to go to college. I mean, how much do you think having that option would maybe benefit a guy like Sam?
Yeah, I mean, on Sam, like Sam had 98 points in the OHL. He won a championship. He won a Memorial Cup. He was Defenseman of the Year. I think Sam was just fine where he was. In terms of, yes, ideally in a perfect world, having that luxury of being able to put guys in NCAA is a great option. I think again, players develop at different times. Players are going to hit at different times. Players are going to peak at different times. And there's no way to say that if Sam was in college hockey either next year or this year, that it would be better for him than wherever he is going to be. So I think as we fill and as we go along, whether Sam's playing, he's playing 30 minutes a night in the OHL versus, 25 minutes in NCAA or 30 minutes in NCAA. I don't know if it necessarily affects Sam. Other players it might. So, I think it's thankfully that's not in my hands. I'm kind of just trying to find the players, and then we have such a great staff with Todd and his crew and Mike that ultimately they're going to make what's the best decision, the kid and the agent and the family, and then we'll go from there.
Is your expectation that all the guys you drafted will be able to be at development camp?
Um, Mago Med Sultanov, I don't think we'll get in time. Other than that, I haven't heard of anybody else not being in, but I don't believe Mago Med Sultanov will make it in.
What do you want to see from the picks and other guys in the organization too? Like, what do you want to see when those guys get to San Jose and get to development camp, get to know each other a little bit? And I mean, what do you want to what do you want to see in that environment, I guess?
Yeah, well, you guys all have to write really good things about them all. That's the first thing.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And that's the first step. No, it's be yourself. I mean, it is summer hockey. I mean, I love the way that Todd approaches. It's come in, get your feet wet, get to know the city, get to know your teammates, be around the group, be around the coaches. I mean, we've talked about it a million times over. And even when I first came here, you don't walk into a locker room and you have Joe Thornton, Patty Marlowe, Mike Greer, Ted Marchand, Dougie Waite, Thomas Vanek. You have all these guys that are in our group that these kids have a chance to really be around, and that's exciting. So just come in, get to know the group, look at, the facilities, see where we're at. Meet your new teammates. And, I think if we're sitting there really judging them in terms of how they play and how they do in a 3-day thing, it's not fair to them. So it's really just to get to know the kids even more and have them come in and feel comfortable being part of the Sharks organization.
I think it's fair to say you touched on it earlier about just um, you know, the direction from Mike and what he wanted to see. I think Richard Gallant is kind of one of the exceptions today as being a guy who's 5'8", 5'9", or whatever. But is it generally speaking, you guys want to just add some size, just some some little more beef to the to the prospect pool here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened with Wang being as big as he is, but we still like the player. I think size is, you can see, you look at the trend around the NHL now, especially in this draft. There's a lot of big boys that were taken, and they're all big kids that can skate. And I think, you're obviously trying to pay attention to trends and where things are going, but you know, Mike also, if you also have to be able to play hockey, and you also have to be a good player, and you also have to do things. So I think we constantly are looking at everything. I never want to say we strictly look and focus in on one thing because it's just not true. We are always looking at everything. And, again, yes, Richard Gallant is not the prototypical, maybe what we've necessarily done last year, because we took Kegs a couple years ago. He wasn't big on the back end. Richard's a little bit different than that as well. And, worked out with Kegs in terms of what he's been able to do. And the one thing that Richard has that all these other big guys have, even probably even more in a lot of cases, is unbelievable compete and relentless. And he's a rat. And those are all things that's going to give that kid every opportunity, despite being the size he is, to play. So that's exciting.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.
We'll go back to Shang.
Chris, I wanted to ask you about a couple players that we didn't really talk too much about. First one, I'm gonna try to say his name correctly, Magomed.
Yep.
What drew you to him?
He is very, very dynamic skater, and he loves to play physical. He's over 6'2", really skate. Not going to give you a ton, high end stuff with the puck, but make a first pass. And really, really physical. And I mean, he's got, in terms of that we talked about passion and how our conversations go in a room. And that was one guy that we walked in and, talked to our group about, and everybody in the room had passion for. So, a little bit of a different one. He's a late birthday. Not maybe as much notoriety around him, but he's a skater, really can skate. He hits extremely hard, and he plays a lot of compete energy, and we're excited.
Is there a sense of when he'll come to North America, or you're not too worried about it? Just let him develop, and when it's time, then you talk about it with him.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, I don't think there's any rush in terms of we're obviously familiar with his contract status and things like that, but there isn't really any, rush in terms of getting him over here in a hurry and seeing where it goes. I mean, we want to see him develop. He got games last year in the KHL, I believe, VHL, MHL. So next step for him is getting himself established and playing, even more in the KHL on a regular basis and getting big minutes and worry about the rest later.
But he is a guy that you think has excitement to come to North America at some point, or NHL at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we do our due diligence on him. We wouldn't have drafted him if if we didn't think he'd ever want to come over. We just don't. A lot of times with those kids, it's, he's developing in a men's league, pro league over there, playing against men every day. If he comes over at, not when everybody wants, but he comes over and plays, that's what we want. So, I think it kind of see it's still, for him, we're letting him kind of enjoy the day, and then we'll get into all that stuff later.
And a couple of guys here, Sharp and Heiss, they're both overagers. Was that something that you guys were kind of looking for, maybe in the later part of this draft, that this draft depth has been debated a lot, and so was that something you guys were looking for to kind of fill out your picks, some overagers that are maybe overlooked a little bit?
Well, I think it goes back to the same question you guys asked earlier about the landscape. We mentioned in the room, I think it was this morning, I said, really the draft isn't just late birthdays and straight birthdays. Now it becomes, 06 is this year, 05 has become, the extension of their runway makes for more teams willing to take overage kids. It's a double-edged sword, right? You're a little bit more, if you take an older kid's been through a couple drafts, he's got 2 more years of maturity, you kind of know more of what his floor is what is maybe not left enough ceiling, as much ceiling left as some kids, but you have a better idea of what their floor is. And so I think with Sharp, he was coming to our camp. Scott Fitzgerald watched him a ton this year. NCAA, he had a great year, really good skater, really good first pass, went back Western Michigan, won. So we had him coming to camp, and the more we started talking about it over the course of the year and final meetings, is the kid deserved to be on our list and deserved to be drafted. So little background on him, and just in terms of his skating, and with Heiss, again, this was a passion pick. Jaron Burke on our staff, Ryan Russell, they really like this kid, and they went to bat for him. They've watched him for a couple of years. He went through, kid kept getting better, long rangey kid, developed in tier 2, now has a chance to go for a year, get better in the Western Hockey League, and then go into school. So Michigan State has a good program. Again, looking at kind of what's their runway, where are they going to develop, and how can they get better, and both kids check those boxes.
And final one for me, and maybe you can't really answer this, or this is a Mike question, but it's from yesterday, and the fans are curious about this. You have Willie Eklund's brother there, Victor. Maybe he fell a little bit. Was there any kind of thought toward, trying to trade up to try to grab him, or is that something they can speak to?
Yeah, Mike will be able to give you that one better. We obviously we liked Eklund, and it was just a matter of where the list was and how things went. But Mike will be able to give you a more in terms of that for sure.
And actually, I did want to ask a little bit about Cole McKinney, just an overall, second round pick, high pick there. So what stood out about his game for you?
Yeah, consistency, strength, face-offs, power. Maybe not necessarily comes in terms of being a highly touted offensive guy, but we really like the consistency of the player. He got better as the year went on. Really good on the PK, really good on the power play for the program. So there's a little bit of everything there with him. And I think just he was one of the guys that once he got to that spot and we're like, oh, he kept kind of sliding. We were really excited to get him because, he brings the same thing night to night. The details are there. He's not the biggest kid in terms of, being 6'3", 6'4", but he's 200 pounds. He's got a great foundation. Details are there. So again, he's going to Michigan, great development path. It's just kind of one of those things where we really like the idea and the profile of the kid, and now it's up to him and our development to make sure it gets there.